Way and welcome everybody to this week's Tuesday night wine chat, and it's English Wine Week. I'm really excited to be joined by Julia Trustram, marketing manager of Wines of Great Britain. What a fantastic time to actually get to talk to you about English wine, British wine, and not only because it's English Wine Week, but also because British wines are riding on something of a crest of a sparkling wine wave. In 2017, there were 1 million vines planted in the UK. In 2019, that number had grown to an astonishing 3 million. Production leapt from 4.2 bottles in 2016 to a whopping 13.2 million bottles in 2018. Julia, welcome. It sounds like a pretty good moment to be promoting Wines of Great Britain.
Well, it couldn't be a better time. And Tony, thank you. How very timely. Fantastic to be speaking to you during English Wine Week. And I hope you appreciate all the good weather that we've arranged as well for the week.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'd love to say this is a live broadcast from a beautiful vineyard, but I'm just going to share with you where I am. I'm not live at that vineyard. I wish I was. That's actually Exton Park in Hampshire, but I just thought I'd show you. Isn't that a beautiful sight? Just to remind us of how lovely our vineyards are looking at the moment.
Yeah, it looks absolutely stunning. Now, you haven't just walked into this job. This has been something you've been focused on for a while. So I'm sure you're an integral part of the success story that is English and now ever more as time progresses, British wine.
I know, I'm sort of rapidly becoming one of the old bags of the industry, actually. I still think I'm pretty youthful, but there you go. Yeah, I mean, I've always worked in the wine trade in different areas before I got into English wine. And it was, I suppose, like with many people, sometimes, you know, you just kind of fall into something and then find that you fall madly in love with that particular job. And it was 20, coming up 27 years ago that I ended up, no, more than that, I ended up working for a vineyard just outside Henley-on-Thames called Chiltern Valley. Yeah. And just got the bug. And it was just at that time. So imagine it. Yeah. So back in 1993, when a few vineyards wanted to get together to enable them to go to big shows like the London Wine Fair, which for the UK wine trade is a really important event, as you know. And the only way of doing it was to put money into a central pot and just go there. And I thought, well, this is great. This is all about telling people about this wonderful industry, because not a lot of people knew about it then. And the likes of the really big wine estate, Denby's Wine Estate, which I'm sure you know, they were just coming onto the scene. They wanted to make a big splash, a big noise, and various others as well. So those 6 vineyards then got together and formed an organisation called English Wine Producers, EWP. And I was with EWP when you and I first met. And it kind of went from strength to strength, because I said, look, you know, I know the wine trade, I know the wine writers, let me just send a press release and tell everybody that that's what we're doing. I have to say, since then, it's kind of roller coasted. You know, EWP then grew to an industry body of about 33 members, but between them, they accounted for something like 80% of everything produced in the UK. They were a pretty powerful force. Yeah. Their primary role was marketing and talking about English wines. But we've now since amalgamated with the then other industry body called the UK Vineyards Association, which was more the legislative representative body. And we are now one, and we'll probably talk about Wine GB in a lot more detail a bit later on. But yeah, so I am celebrating, 29 years in this industry.
Oh my goodness. You definitely don't look old enough for that. Now, when we first met, Hotel de Van were playing host to an English wine trade fair. Vicky and Amy organised that with you, what must have been at least 5 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. We've stayed in touch. That event helped me understand more about English and British wine. It was a real eye-opener. I think, you know, I knew about Night Timber and I thought that was fantastic, but it opened my eyes to a wider British wine community that were producing some amazing things. Subsequently, having got a bit of a thirst for English and British wine, I've hosted a few different events over the years. We did one together at Hotel de Van, didn't we? Which was really good fun. And I remember everybody raving about you know, English sparkling with fish and chips as like a intermediary course, which was fantastic. And I'm regularly doing different tastings using different different producers. We've done a Hattingley Valley dinner at the Hyatt. We did an English wine dinner probably 12 months ago, actually, at Hampton Manor, which our dates couldn't quite tie in to do that together. But I know, you know, I'd love for us to be able to do an event together again. Now, going back to 2018. Being such an amazing year, 13.2 million bottles produced. Was that just a one-off freak year, or what can we expect moving forwards?
I think 2018 was the year that really put English still wines back on the map.
Yeah.
We've, as an industry, we've been producing wines commercially, you know, for well over 50 years. In fact, actually, since the Second World War, if you want to go back to when the first commercial vineyard was founded,
yeah,
back in the 50s. But in the last sort of 20, 30 years, it's been the sparkling wines that have really, you know, dominated, and to a larger extent, understandably and rightly so, because they really punched up and produced these incredible wines and really showed what the UK was capable of in terms of quality wine. And I suppose with sparkling wines, they were produced with the same grape varieties and in the same method as champagne. So there was an immediate kind of comparative benchmark, if you like. And the fact that these sparkling wines were going out and were going into blind tastings and competitions, still do, and winning really top prizes, sometimes beating some of our more famous sparkling wine compatriots, if you like. Yeah. Sparkling still wines in many ways got slightly left behind. I've always thought that there's been a real character and charm about English still wines, but 2018 was such a phenomenal year for ripeness. It was a lovely hot year, and I have to say, looking outside today, yeah, let's hope that, you never know, will 2020 be another one?
We need some good news this year, don't we?
Yeah, we do, exactly. Well, something to cheer us up, exactly. And I think it just produced sort of fruit characters that just exceeded everybody's expectations, and some unbelievably good still wines resulted from it. And it was also, of course, an opportunity. You know, still wines were the first to be able to show just how good that vintage was and what we can do here. Because, of course, most, if not nearly all, the sparkling wines, they're not ready yet. We're not going to see them for another year or two. Yeah. So I think it really showed what we can do here. Now, that's not to say that you have to have a near perfect summer to create really good wines. It just so happened that that summer was beautiful and dry and warm, and the grapes were ripe, and it just showed us what we were capable of doing.
Now, of course, not only was it a big year in terms of volume, you've talked eloquently there about the quality of wine that was produced. I guess the true testament to that was an English wine winning World Still Wine of the Year. I can't remember what contest it was, but down in Wimbury, they had some extraordinary success, didn't they?
They did. That was a Bacchus, and that was in the Decanter World Wine Awards, which is really, really some feat, actually. It was fantastic. It introduced, I think, Bacchus to the global stage. We're very excited about Bacchus as a great variety, but there's some other lovely ones out there now. But do you know what? There are some other still wines that are really making their mark now. Last year, it was the end of last year, and it was publicised earlier this year, a Sauvignon Blanc grown in Gloucestershire won a gold medal in the Global Masters Championship run by a trade magazine called Drinks Business, Global Wine Masters Sauvignon Blanc. Now, we all know where Sauvignon Blanc is grown, and actually what's fantastic wines you get from around the world. Little did anyone expect that there was one from Gloucestershire that just went in there and got a gold medal as well. So yeah, the English still wines are certainly making their mark, and I think it's making people really see the kind of diversity and the complexity of some of our wines. And you know, on wine lists, it's lovely to have that kind of whole variety as well. And actually, we got a survey through quite recently. I think it was done in a digital marketing agency, and they registered all the kind of searches that people did about wine just as lockdown happened. And English wine was kind of right up there matching Spanish wine, but it was for still wine, which is really, really good. And, you know, retailers have been talking to us about how well sales have been going in the last few months compared to, say, last year. And quite a lot of that is driven by our still wines. I think that's fantastic. I mean, it's 30% of our total production, so it's not small,
No.
smaller than sparkling, and we're so proud of sparkling. But you know,
that must have increased quite a bit in recent years then to get to 30, or has it always been around that number?
It's sort of been around about that. In fact, sparkling wines has been creeping up a little bit.
Okay.
A few years ago, I think it was about 60%. Now I think we comfortably say it's about sort of 70%. So it's 70-30 there or thereabouts.
Okay, well, you mentioned a really, you know, an award-winning Sauvignon Blanc from England. We mentioned Bacchus. I've heard Bacchus referred to as England's Sauvignon Blanc. Is that a fair, you know, for somebody that hasn't tried it, is that a fair statement or label?
Yeah, I think it probably is actually, because it then sort of you can sort of imagine what you're going to expect from a Bacchus, and you know, you could say that at the moment it is one of our signature grape varieties. I think what's really exciting about English wine is that, you know, we're not an old wine region. We don't, you know, we're not encased in lots of historic laws and traditions about what you grow where and all the rest of it. And we're experimenting all the time. But Bacchus has definitely found its feet as one of our great, you know, still wine varieties. It makes quite nice sparkling too, but it's aromatic, it's crisp, it's grassy, and I know a lot of people, when they smell it and taste it, they think hedgerows and elderflowers, you know, all lovely classic English, you know, resonating noise, you know, resonating names and things. And so I think it's still too early to say, you know, what our signature still varieties are, because I think we're still experimenting. So we're not quite yet there with Sauvignon Blanc, New Zealand, and Malbec in Argentina, but I would say that Bacchus is a pretty strong contender.
Is there a signature style that we've got in this country, would you say, or on this island?
For still wines, I think probably the overriding one is the aromatic sort of white. Actually, even our rosés. I've got a little rosé here. Can everyone see? There we go. Nice little rosé. Light, fruity, aromatic, fresh, delicate. So I think that those are all words that encapsulate quite a lot of our styles. And actually there are so many other grape varieties beyond Bacchus. But I think when grown in England, a lot of them display these lovely, fresh, fruity, aromatic styles, which I think people really like. And on nights like this evening, something that's got a nice bit of acidity in it and crispness is just what you need, really.
Yeah, well, actually, I've got something very local. I've got a bottle of Black Country Gold,
just done,
Hackney Green, very local, and it is just that. We've got a nice shot of acidity, but it's aromatic. Very, you know, we've got a shared passion for Alsace wine as well, and it's got all those aromatic characteristics. It feels like it's got a bit of muscat going in there, and you guessed what one of the grape components must be earlier, but. Just looking at that, Huxell-Rieber, Faber, and Regner. So not great names that will kind of immediately spring to mind of the average British consumer. So where do those grape varieties come from? They're not, you know, some of the common traditional grapes that we're familiar with.
No, we've been through quite a kind of revolution, if you like. Back in the sort of 50s, 60s, 70s, and actually 80s to some extent, we were still planting or growing a lot of the Germanic varieties. So a lot of those grape varieties will originate from Germany. In fact, Bacchus originates from Germany as well, and it's a crossing between the two great varieties, Riesling and Silvaner, and crossed again with Müller-Thurgau. And actually, Müller-Thurgau is Riesling and Silvaner. We used to grow a lot of Müller-Thurgau as well. But I think, you know, what's lovely is over the last sort of decades as well, we've seen so many changes in winemaking as well, and actually people producing wine to the style that people want. And I think we're kind of moving towards a slightly drier style as well. So you're going to see far fewer of the kind of Germanic hock type styles, which we used to produce. And actually now producing something that's got some slightly crisper, fresher flavors, maybe a bit drier. It's actually working with the acidity. I mean, let's face it, we are still a marginal climate in the UK. And so you would expect to get these higher levels of acidity. But use it to our advantage. I mean, how lucky are we? There are a lot of countries that are suffering from, you know, a lot of heat and ever more so, unfortunately. And, you know, love this fresh sort of cool climate that we've got here. And of course that works very well to the advantage of the sparkling wines too. Now, 30 years ago or so, I think people thought it was absolutely mad to grow Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, that sort of thing. But of course, when you're producing a champagne or a traditional method sparkling wine, you actually need that higher levels of acidity to produce the kind of complex flavors that you're going to get through secondary fermentation.
So now I've tried some great Pinot Blanc from these isles. I love Stopham Estate Pinot Gris.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah.
I've not seen any Riesling as yet, and one would imagine that it should grow pretty well here.
Do you know, it's really funny. We grow quite a lot of varieties that have Riesling in its parentage, but we don't grow a lot of Riesling. Very few vineyards do. It's quite a tricky grape variety. So in fact, I think, sons and daughters or grandchildren of Riesling seem to work a bit better. And of course, Bacchus is one of them. You're absolutely right. I mean, I think, in this sort of newer generation of vineyards and winemakers and things, actually, Pinot Blanc, Pinot Gris, amazing. And we were talking about loving Alsace as a region, you and me. And what I love about the Pinot Gris from Alsace is you get that aromatic style. And we have it, but it's slightly grassier, it's slightly more herbaceous. It's kind of found a slightly different character when grown in the UK. And wow, with a few grams of sugar as well in it. So it's not a bone dry wine. Boy, oh boy, do you get lots of flavors. Fabulous for food.
Yeah. And of course, now I read that that Bacchus actually wasn't successful in Germany, particularly because it was never as good at doing what it was intended to do, to be high acidity, fresh tasting wine. It could never really compare with Riesling. But obviously, with our slightly cooler climate, that Bacchus is actually better grown in Great Britain than it is in its kind of native Germany where it was invented.
Well, do you know, it's really funny you say that, and I don't want to malign all the fabulous grape growers and producers of Bacchus in Germany, but I have not yet tasted a German Bacchus that has that same kind of freshness and herbaceousness. So yes, I mean, somehow it's taken a lot more to the to the slightly cooler climates of the UK. And actually, whilst we don't yet have kind of regions in our country like you have in France with Chablis and Bordeaux and Burgundy and the like, actually there are obviously going to be some slight variations on the same variety grown in different parts of the country. Quite understandably, we've got different soils and different microclimates and all the like. And a Bacchus from, say, East Anglia, so Winbury, that won the decanter, actually tastes very different from the Bacchus grown, say, down in Cornwall. Camel Valley have actually got the only kind of single PDO, smaller PDO, that's protected designation of origin, so like Appellation Contrôlée, for a single vineyard down there, Darnibol, for the Bacchus that they grow on that plot. And that's totally different. And then a Bacchus from Kent is slightly richer, slightly fuller. It has more tropical fruits to it, if you like. So we've got some really exciting things ahead of us, that we're still only discovering, really, and finding out.
That does sound like an interesting evening, trying all those together.
Yeah, actually it would be. In fact, maybe throw in a Bacchus from Germany so that you can actually see, you can get to know Bacchus, the grape variety. What a great name as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, I've not tried it yet. I love the wines from Anchor Hill, but I've not tried their Albarino yet. How is that drinking, and how might that compare to something from Galicia?
Well, again, obviously very different. It's going to, the acidity is going to be a little bit more pronounced, and it'll take on some other of those kind of herbaceous nuances, I think. And actually, there's some Albarino grown by Chapeldown as well, down in Kent.
Okay.
I have to confess, I've not tasted the two side by side. Perhaps I ought to. I mean, is this a grape variety of the future? Who knows? I mean, some of our vineyards are experimenting with all sorts of other varieties. Chasselas, the Swiss grape variety, that's being grown by Bluebell in Sussex. We've also got some Cabernet Sauvignon. Actually, there's a bit of Cabernet has been grown for quite some time, actually, down in Sharpham, also near Devon, but it's run by Sharpham Estate, and also actually in Gloucestershire. And then we've also got Cabernet Noir, which is another Swiss variety that is grown in Essex. and there's an urban winery called Black Book that's produced a variety there. So, you know, I mean, as far as I can see, the world's our oyster. Actually, we've got all sorts of new possibilities opening to us, whilst obviously still experimenting with and trying out you know, other styles and things of the existing varieties that we've got.
Yeah,
no,
brilliant. Now let's talk about the reds, because I remember somebody saying to me, look, you'll never get decent red wine growing in this country. It just can't happen. We haven't got the climate for it. Well, I now know that they were wrong. You know, Anchor Hill Pinot Noir, Gusbourne, Bolney Estate, Foxhole Single Vineyard. I think it might actually have a different name now, but I couldn't see any more of that. But I really enjoyed that a few years ago. Really surprises me to hear you talk about a Cabernet Sauvignon. I wonder what that would be like, because I can understand actually an argument saying Cabernet Sauvignon or Malbec probably not best suited to our climate.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Tony. I mean, you need, for a lot of these red grape varieties, you actually need heat to actually ripen the grape skins. Otherwise, you end up with something very green, very tart. I mean, the Cabernet Sauvignon, quite a lot of it, if not all of it, quite a lot of it is grown sort of under glass or in polytunnels and things, because you need to sort of build up that kind of heat level.
Yeah.
A little bit of Merlot, by the way, produced as well. But the lighter varieties, so those varieties that produce a lighter style of wine, so you mentioned absolutely Pinot Noir.
Yeah.
There's a lot of absolutely wonderful Pinot Noir reds now being produced. And our producers who grow them will either use clones from Burgundy or from Champagne in some cases. And quite a lot of them are actually growing this Pinot for sparkling wine, specifically for sparkling wine. But actually in certain years, and in fact, I think in some cases it's becoming more and more, you know, a regular feature. Actually, that, you know, they then think, wow, this Pinot is actually is ripening really well. So let's make a red wine. Pinot Noir, I think, is one of those great varieties that the winemaker loves to control, and it's a pretty complexly great variety, and it'll do what it likes, frankly. But actually, we're finding it's producing some really wonderful red wines, as you rightly say. Another variety, not a lot of it grown here, and I think it's quite a tricky grape variety to grow, is Gamay. And Biddenden is one of the flag wavers for Gamay, and they've produced an absolutely fabulous light Beaujolais style red wine. So if you like the slightly lighter fruity style, actually it's something in red wines that we're starting to produce really lovely examples of, just not sadly a great deal of it.
Yeah, that is music to Mrs. Elvin next door, who brings through all the questions. So if you've got any questions for us, please fire those through the Facebook channels or on Zoom, and you know, we'll give Julia a grilling with your questions as well. But yeah, Mrs. Elvin loves a cool climate Pinot Noir, so yeah, I'm sure she'd be delighted to try that as well. And now, I remembered.
Sorry.
When we did that dinner, it was actually a white Pinot Noir that we paired with fish and chips.
Do you know, I think you're right. We did, absolutely. Yes.
Would that have been 3 quires?
That would have been the 3 quires. I'm trying to remember now. Or it could have been 16 ridges.
Oh, it was one of the 2 for sure. Yeah. They both featured on the night, and it was superb. It was an absolute dream. Really, really, really good.
But the sparkling goes well with fish and chips.
Of course, yeah.
Fish and chips.
Now we're seeing more and more English wine in supermarkets. Again, much of this is sparkling, but now we're seeing more and more of the still British wine. Which supermarkets have been the most supportive to the British wine industry that you've seen so far? There are a lot of them now, which is fantastic. The ones at the very front of that is Waitrose. For a long time now, they've really got behind British products generally, but they've really supported the UK wine industry over a number of years. They've got a very big list. I can't quite remember how many they've got at the moment, but you know, it's gone up to about 100. It'll certainly be about 80 or so at the moment. If you go onto the Waitrose cellar, so they do a lot online, of course. And they've just taken on some new lines of English wines, which they announced last week, just ahead of English Wine Week, which was lovely. And they really support producers of all sizes. And that's what's great, you know. So we've got some own label Waitrose wines now, as you'll find in other supermarkets too. So Tesco's have got own label still and sparkling wines. M&S have done.
The Co-op have a own label sparkling wine as well, so it's definitely worth looking out for it. And of course, that's a real seal of approval, and delivers, gives a real assurance to someone who hasn't perhaps tried English wines or many English wines.
Yeah.
You know, if you've got one of these supermarkets behind it, then that's you can give it a go.
Yeah.
I must mention the indies as well, because there are some fantastic independent wine merchants. Because of course they hand sell, don't they? You know, they really know their customers, and if you're a wine enthusiast and you're lucky enough to have a fantastic wine merchant. I know you've got one or two on the doorstep, Tony. You've got some fabulous ones. They really get behind English wines because they can tell the story. You know, they can talk about it a lot. So yeah, I mean, we're pretty lucky actually. There's English wines are a lot more available, and Welsh wines a lot more available than you think. I mean, sometimes you've got to ask for them. Sometimes you've got to look for them because, you know, imagine going into a supermarket, you're not going to have the same number of English and Welsh wines as, say, Australian wines or anything like that. But have a look, you'll see them now. It's brilliant.
And I think something that Waitrose do well is with that list of 80 to 100, whilst they're probably all available online, what I have noticed is that regionally, you'll find wines produced near your area in your local supermarket. As much as they can.
Yeah, and that's really highlighting what's going on the doorstep, and that's wonderful.
Yeah.
They have the ability to be able to source locally. So even where I'm based near Market Harbour in Leicestershire. You know, we've got some vineyards nearby, and I know that they're for sale in some of our local Waitroses. So you're absolutely right. They do some lovely sort of regional focus as well, which I think is really important for the industry as a whole.
Yeah. Now, obviously, buying from an independent retailer, many of these guys, particularly now, over the last few months, doing a roaring trade online. What are some, but let's deal with the supermarket first of all. If you were going to go into a supermarket and try English wine for the first time or a Welsh wine, what should people look out for that is sold through the major supermarket chains?
Well, I think first up, actually, go to the own label. Waitrose have got an own label still white wine, and they've actually got their own sparkling wine, Leckford Estates. They've got their own vineyard actually.
Wow.
But you've also got some really reliable brands out there now, which include Nye Timber. You mentioned Nye Timber. There's Ridgeview as well, another top sparkling wine estate, and then you've got Chapeldown. And they're big enough to be able to sell their wines through quite a number of the supermarkets as well as the independents. And they've got wide enough ranges as well, so there's no kind of conflict of interest, if you like. I mean, I like what Tesco's have been doing with their own label. And again, you've got an own label sparkling wine, and it's not bad price. I mean, it's £16.99 or something. And it's a good starter for 10, and the still wines, I think, in Waitrose and Tesco start from what, £8.99?
Yeah,
not unreasonable.
It's kind of what you'd spend on a bottle of wine now, anyway, isn't it?
Really? Yeah, absolutely.
And has that 2018 harvest helped that price point, do you think, at all?
I think so. I mean, it has meant that there's more available, which is great. But I don't think that the volume is actually determining the price. I think. There's obviously compromise, isn't there? And obviously the production costs in England are going to be perhaps a little bit higher compared to some of the larger wine regions. It's economies of scale. But I think to pitch it at a price that people feel is worthwhile, then we shouldn't shy away from not producing the sort of 3 for a tenner or 2 for a tenner or something like that. These are pretty top quality wines now, and if you use the context of buying a bottle of Chablis, for example, you'd question it if it was below a tenner, wouldn't you? You actually would expect to pay a certain price for it. I think what 2018 has done, or rather the increasing volumes, has actually meant greater availability in more places. And I think, to me, that's the important thing. It wasn't all that long ago where people would say, look, I taste these wines, I think they're great, but where on earth can I find them? Now you can say, actually, just look on the shelf of a supermarket or Majestic or an independent wine merchant. What our great ambition, of course, is for people to go into any restaurant or any bar and, instead of ordering a glass of Prosecco, order a glass of English sparkling wine.
Absolutely.
And that's starting to happen. And, I know some of the great restaurants in Birmingham are really getting behind our wines and putting them alongside all the fantastic British food that they serve.
Yeah. And a big shout to Craft Dining Rooms, who who feature only British wines or wines with a British
Absolutely.
connection. So, and that's got to be a location for us to do a dinner, I'm sure.
Do you know what? Absolutely. And you know, I think those guys are fantastic, because I'm sure that when you're there sitting down, you're looking at the menu, and if you don't really know what to order, they're the guys who'll be able to say, right, well, if you like this food, then can we suggest this to go with it? And they'll be able to recommend it. Yeah, I know, they're fantastic.
So that's the supermarkets. Try some of the own label ones, because actually it's a seal of approval anyway that they want to put their name on it. And I think Waitrose, is it Denby's that make the own label, perhaps?
It is, absolutely. Yeah. And again, that's
So
going to be your sort of typical lovely, fresh, crisp, aromatic, you know, aromatic wine. So it's great. You can get Bacchus. I think Majestic do the Chapel Down Bacchus, and they do a blend called Flint Dry, which is, you know, it's a lovely kind of lovely stable. Every year, it never fails to do anything other than tell you the story of English wine. You know, crisp, clean, fresh, gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah. So with the whole of the British Isles at our fingertips on the internet, are there any kind of newcomers to the scene that we should be supporting, and that you've seen some amazing things coming from that perhaps we should order and try?
Golly, that could take the entire hour, actually, Tony.
It's probably a bit of an unfair question, given that you represent everybody. I appreciate that.
I think one thing that I do want to say is, actually, yes, there are lots of newcomers, but I don't think we should overlook the longer established vineyards as well. I mean, the one thing about the UK wine industry is, and why I think it's so exciting, is you've got this fabulous mix of now established wine families. Believe it or not, we've got, you know, several that are on second, sometimes even third generation. And by the way, if you look on the website, we did it for Father's Day. We put together a page just highlighting some of the fathers and offspring in the UK wine industry, and there's some lovely stories there. Check it out. But and actually, you know, during the time that they've been around, you know, and particularly now if the sons and daughters have come in, you know, they're doing new things. In some cases, they've replanted, or they're producing different styles. The other thing about the newcomers is, for a lot of people, it's a second career. So they've had a very successful career beforehand. And it's from a whole load of different, so they bring a whole load of different skill sets. So we've obviously got farming, we've got people who've actually been in the city, but we've got people who've been in IT, who've been in filmmaking, who've been in, you know, and you've got this glorious, rather vibrant mix of people who are bringing some really interesting, in some cases wildly quirky, you know, sort of aspects to the industry. I mean, there's and I was going to mention the urban wineries, because I think that's pretty cutting edge, and there are some terrific ones.
Explain to everybody what an urban, what does that mean? What is an urban wine?
It's basically a winery that's set up in a town or city. So obviously they're not growing the grapes, so they buy the grapes in, they source the grapes from various vineyards around the country, so they supply them with grapes, and then they just make them into wine in these units. A lot of them are in London, but there's one up near Newcastle, producing some really interesting wine, actually. Lanneberg, they're called, or Laneberg. And they've all trained, you know, these guys have trained at Plumpton College, which is down in the south. It's based near Lewes in Sussex. And they train a lot of winemakers and viticulturists that actually go abroad, not just in the UK. But there are several in London to look out for as well. And they have really interesting, quirky styles. You know, there's one called Black Book, there's one called Renegade, there's another one called London Crew.
London Crew, I'm very familiar with.
London Crew, absolutely,
very and they're all kind of minimal intervention stuff as well. London Crew.
Absolutely. So you've got some really cracking wines, but you know, slightly different styles. And then you've actually got some producers who've taken over vineyards that had already been established, but they might have bought or whatever, you know, the property, and they're sort of turning it around. You know, so there are a lot, but don't overlook the ones that have been there for a while, because I think a lot of them are coming into their own and just constantly innovating. I think innovation is a big word that we can confidently use in the UK.
Yeah. Well, I imagine some of these longer standing organisations, given that you've been involved for a while, you've probably seen quite a transformation in some of these over the years as well, and how they've needed to probably professionalise to be able to distribute the volumes that they do.
Yes, I think that's right. And actually, the other aspect is actually changing their business around a little bit as well. So, bringing in a little bit of diversity. One of the big things, and it's going to continue to grow, is wine tourism.
Yeah.
And if you think the likes of, well, we were talking about Halfpenny Green a bit earlier on.
Yeah.
Actually, they've got a fantastic place to go and visit, where they've got other shops there, and they've got a tea room and a nice restaurant, whatever, and a shop, of course. 3 Choirs, not that far away. They've had it for a while, but they've got a hotel on site. They've got these vineyard lodges, but they're constantly innovating. Just recently, they produced a whole range of canned wine. And actually, I saw some people might have seen on Saturday Kitchen on the BBC this last Saturday.
Yeah.
They've produced a bag in box, the 3 Choirs Bacchus bag in box. I mean, how cool is that? Brilliant.
Went down very well with Jack Whitehall, I believe.
It seemed to go down very well with Jack Whitehall. Yes. Well, at least he had a smile on his face.
Yeah, to the extent that he polished off half the bag in box 3/4 of the way through the TV show, I think. But
exactly. I mean, I think the biggest change I've seen in the last sort of couple of decades is the wine consumer's attitude. I remember when I was working back at Chiltern Valley. When you got people to taste the wine, they said, this is really good. But actually, if you mentioned the words English wine to people, they'd go, well, we can't make it in this country. Or how could it possibly be nice? We've got such foul weather. Or it's too expensive. I'm not even going to try it, and I wouldn't know what it tastes like. And, and I can't find it. All these rather negative things. But now, if I do tastings or talk to people, and hopefully you see this too, Tony, when you're talking to people, they go, oh, wow, yeah, no, I'd really like to taste some, and we get all sorts of people really keen to taste. And the other great sort of revolution really has been social media. We've got a lot of people on social media, in Instagram and Twitter and Facebook particularly, who are talking about English wines. They're really enthusiastic, and this week actually it's worth checking out. Obviously after this broadcast is finished, there are a lot of virtual tastings going on, Instagram live sessions, interviews with winemakers, getting to know these people, and that's all being led by these fantastic bunch of people, you included, who are just really keen to communicate, and learn a bit more about English wines and help other people do so too.
So if people are liking what they're hearing from us tonight and they want to hear a bit more about English wines from Great Britain, there's a lot going on this week, isn't it? Well, specifically with English wines. How do they find out about those other events this week?
Well, the best thing to do, two ways really. One is go onto our website, so that's winegb.co.uk, and we've actually split them between events and promotions. Now, a normal English Wine Week, there would be tons of things going on in the vineyards. This is when the vineyards are coming to life. This is when they throw open their doors. This is when the cellar doors are open. It's when the restaurants are open, and you can do guided tours, you can do all sorts of things, winemakers dinners and all the like. Of course, unfortunately this year it's a little bit different, but that hasn't stopped people doing really innovative things. So just a few coming to mind are Whiston Estate, which is down in Sussex, one of our super sparkler estates. They're doing an interview with the founders of the estate. They're a family that have been there for many generations, but it was they're now on second generation, but the ones that founded it are being interviewed. And then actually the winemaker, who's a guy called Dermot Sugru, who's a very charismatic Irishman, and one of the family apparently going to be doing a live rummage around the cellars and to try and find some interesting bottles and open them up. And then actually anybody who's been down to Camel Valley, I know I've mentioned them before, but they do every Wednesday without fail, they do a grand tour, which is always going to be led by one of the family, either Bob or his son Sam, who's the winemaker now. And of course, they've not been able to do that, but they're going to do a virtual vineyard tour. And I've seen that with a few other wineries as well. So the other way of finding out is actually going on to social media, hashtag English Wine Week, or hashtag @WineGB. Then if you go follow that, I was on Twitter a little bit earlier, and I was going cross-eyed with the amount of stuff that was going on and people talking about it. And you can find out what's going on near you or any promotions that are going on. So people have been really inventive, considering that the vineyards aren't really open.
I think it's been brilliant to see not just the wine industry, but everyone's having to think out of the box, particularly with the restaurants. We can get your own kits and you cook it and prepare it. There's been some brilliant stuff that actually probably won't go away after this whole pandemic situation. I think there's been some real positive new changes of ways that we can connect with people. So
I think that's
been
right. And
great to
vineyards
see.
have actually really learned that this is such a great way, you know, either via Zoom or via social media posts, whatever, to actually do more communicating with people.
Yeah.
People
Yeah.
are longing to learn, and you can actually reach out to lots of people. And I don't know about you, but one of the jobs I used to have years ago was working in the wine tourism sector, actually, organising wine tours to vineyards. And of course, the one thing that really brings, I think, a wine to life is meeting the people behind the wine, be it the winemaker, be it the owner, be it the viticulturist. And they're all such interesting people. And thanks to all this fantastic modern technology, you can really, you know, you can meet them, can't you?
Yeah, yeah. Now, you know, we've heard the announcement today that from 4th of July, people will be able to go back into restaurants again. I'm sure that will be, you know, the green light for wine tourism to open again, particularly if there's a chance to walk through the vineyard in the fresh air. I think it's very low risk activity. How would people find out about those cellar door opportunities if they want to visit a winery? Can they do that by checking out the website?
Yeah, they can. And actually, there are quite a lot of websites that list vineyards that are open to the public as well. We've got a vineyard listing, so you can check out all of those and obviously go online, and they'll keep people updated. I know that a lot of vineyards are really excited about everything being able to open up again.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's going to be different, but it's just lovely to hear some of those voices as soon as it was announced earlier on today, saying our cafe is going to be back open again, and come and see us. And I think people are desperate to do so. And as luck would have it, you know, July, August and into September, it's such a wonderful time of year to go and visit these vineyards and you know, see what it's like. There may be some very obvious restrictions on tastings. At the moment, we're still combing through all the various measures and the whys and wherefores and all the health and safety precautions that obviously have to be made. But you know, it'll obviously be set out very clearly on the website and on the vineyard websites as well.
I'm sure there's a way to make all these things happen. So, you know, with my day job in the retail sector, we've had to make changes, but it's all still happening. It's all working. And so, yeah.
It's all working. We're so excited about the restaurants opening again as well. You know, so many of our vineyards supply the restaurants. You know, some of them are local, obviously, and there's a great relationship between, you know, local outlets and the vineyards themselves. I mean, if you think about it, you know, tourism, as I mentioned before, is a really big thing. And it's not just bringing people to a vineyard. Those people, you know, may stay in the area. They may use a garage. They may go to a grocery store. They may go to a pub. You know, I mean, it's a big thing, and everybody is just longing for it to, you know, to all open up again. So, you know, great news.
Yeah, good. Now it's that time of the night, Julia. It is time for your 20 questions.
Yes, you warned me about this, and
I warned you about it.
I have seen examples
so
of it.
Here's the rules. I'm going to give you two options. You've got to choose one or the other.
Okay.
No dithering. You've got to answer straight away, impulsively. 2 minutes. You're on the clock,
I see greater
Julia.
mortals than me squirm at this, Tony.
Okay, Julia, here's your 20 questions.
Okay.
Chardonnay or Sauvignon Blanc?
Sauvignon Blanc.
Fine dining or steak and chips?
Fine dining.
Oaked or unoaked?
Ooh. Unoaked.
Apple or Android?
Apple.
Bordeaux or Burgundy?
Burgundy.
Tassingure or Pommery?
I know why you asked that question too. Tassinger.
Okay. Tassinger or Nightimber?
Now that's really mean. Well, I got to say Nightimber because Tassinger haven't produced their sparkling wine yet.
Off the hook there. Ugel or Trimbach?
Ugel.
New World or Old World?
Now that's different these days. Oh, I'll have to say Old World.
Jancis Robinson or Oz Clarke?
Oh, you're cruel. You're really cruel. Oz Robinson or Jancis Clarke?
Cristal or Dom Perignon?
Cristal.
Syrah or Shiraz?
Syrah.
Waitrose or Marks and Spencer?
That's really mean as well. Waitrose.
Malbec or Cabernet Sauvignon?
Cabernet Sauvignon.
Left bank or right bank?
Left bank.
Still wine or sparkling?
Sparkling.
Cheese before dessert or after dessert?
After dessert.
Port or sherry?
Port.
South America or South Africa?
South Africa.
And finally, champagne or English sparkling?
English sparkling.
I thought I'd give you that one at the end. Well done, Julia. Thank you for being a good sport.
Really,
That was your 20
that
questions.
was very, very tough. That was harder than I thought it was going to be.
No, you're good sport. Thank you.
And I particularly like the question Taittinger or Pommery because I don't know if everybody knows it, but those are the two champagne houses that have set up operations in England.
So have we had our first production from either of those? We've not, have we?
Well, we have from Pommery in as much as they've produced a wine, Louis Pommery, which is available, but it's from grapes that they've sourced from Hampshire rather than from their own vineyard.
Okay.
So they wanted to go ahead and actually get a product out, which was very clever because it's obviously getting the name out. Taittinger, I don't think we're going to see, I think probably in both cases, we're not going to see any of their wines until much later into the 20s, maybe 25, something like that.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So, but I mean, it just endorses everything you guys are doing, that they're maybe a little bit worried the champagne houses are coming over and planting vines in England because we're making such great wine.
It's I mean, that's the best endorsement you could ever ask for, isn't it? I mean, I talked about these huge competition successes that were led by Nye Timber, but very, very fast behind them was the likes of Ridgeview and Chapeldown as well, and really many others to boot. And you've got Hambledon and Whiston and Exton Park and, you know, all these different estates. But actually to have champagne houses come and plant is quite something. I mean, you know, Champagne is going through, I'm sure, some inevitable changes led by climate change. Yeah. And England is still, southern England is still, you know, a couple of degrees further north to Champagne. So, you know, we're the next best thing.
That's right. Often when we do tastings, we're talking to people about actually with climate change and the fact that we've got that chalky soil down in the south of England, it kind of is Champagne, you know, a while back, isn't it? So there's every reason why we should be able to produce exceptional sparkling wine, and every reason why we are already. So yeah. And
actually, fun enough, it was only a few years ago that I really twigged. But if you look at the map of southern England and northern France, it's actually a bit like a jigsaw puzzle, which of course it would be, because of course the the British Isles kind of broke away from Northern Europe, and
not for the last time.
Well, exactly. Oh, yeah. Yes, I hadn't thought of that. But actually, so that wonderful band of chalk that is known as the Paris Basin, that whole geological formation that stretches down to the Champagne region, but it's that same band of chalk that goes onto the channel, re-emerges, you know, White Cliffs of Dover, and it runs along as a wonderful seam all along the South Downs, which takes you up to Winchester and then sort of up and round and north. Then you've got the wonderful North Downs as well, and that's beautiful chalk as well. And Chapeldown, amongst other, Taittinger is planted on the North Downs, as is Simpson's Wine Estate. Yeah. And you know, they reckon there is some of the best fruit in England there. It's not the Garden of England for nothing down there, but this time it's the grapes that are really coming into their own. So we've got the soil, we've got the right conditions. Chardonnay and Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier are now, they account for something like 65% or maybe a little bit more of all the grape varieties planted. So we were talking about all those other lovely white and red varieties that we grow, but actually the real dominance now is with our sparkling wines.
Yeah, and if 65% of the production is those three grapes, that aligns perfectly with 70% of production is sparkling wine, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, there's some real innovation going on in sparkling wine too. So about 99% of all our sparkling wines are the traditional method, the classic method sparkling wine, so produced exactly as you'd find in Champagne. Most of them are the traditional varieties, but there are some great examples of wines produced by the same method, but perhaps a slightly different variation of varieties, a mixture of Chardonnay and Pinots, but with others. There's a variety called Sévin Blanc, which is a hybrid variety. It's quite an old variety, but it produces quite a sort of neutral wine that lends itself beautifully to sparkling wine production and oak aging and all that sort of thing. And there are a number of vineyards, you know, away from the south of England that actually can't produce or ripen Chardonnay and Pinot Noir perhaps quite so well, and they rely on these varieties. And actually, fun enough, I had a fantastic aged Seyval Blanc sparkling wine from a wonderful producer called Breaky Bottom down in Sussex. And it was fantastic, you know, really complex. So we've got some new varieties that are sort of popping up on the scene. And of course, coming back to the styles, we've now got, you know, with innovation, all this lovely innovative production going on, we've now got different styles of sparkling wines coming onto the scene. So we've got Charmat method wines, we've got tank method wines, we've got Pet Nat. We've got canned sparkling, you know, aerated. So there's a lot happening out there, and it's something that, you know, that we're really applauding and we're really excited about. But you know, what's really key to us is you know, what is still very, very precious to us are those amazing sparkling wines. They're the ones that have become our hero brands. You know, when you think of English wine, you said it yourself, Night Timber, you know. And it is led, and the charge should be led by those amazing producers that are producing something quite extraordinary.
Yeah, we're talking about a couple of trailblazers of the UK wine industry. At number 10, they serve Chapel Down, and Night Timber is the house pour at Buckingham Palace. Both two great wines to represent the country with foreign dignitaries. So tell us a bit about those. I mean, Night Timber famously regularly beating Grand Marque champagnes in blind tastings in Paris, you know, that kind of stuff. Talk to us about Night Timber. Night
Timber are a fascinating brand, and they've had a really, they've got a great history. It was first set up, well, the first vineyards were planted in 1988. So a while back now. That's sort of history in English wine terms. It was established by an American couple called Stuart and Sandy Moss. And I remember at the time, you know, people were pretty horrified that actually this couple were coming to the UK and they wanted to plant varieties that until then were regarded as almost unplantable, really. And they produced their first one in 1992, which was released in 96, and it went in, I think it was 95, 96, it went into the International Wine Spirit Competition and it won a trophy. And then suddenly people were absolutely gassed. And then actually that's for a Blanc de Blanc, 100% Chardonnay. And the following year they did the same thing again with a classic cuvee.
Yeah.
Hot on their heels actually is a label that you didn't mention, but I would love to mention is Ridgeview.
Yes.
They too are based in Sussex, and actually they too are served at number 10 and at Buckingham Palace. So I think the Queen served their wines at the Golden Jubilee and things. But just coming back briefly to Night Timber, it's now owned by a chap called Eric Harima, who has expanded the Night Timber empire from that 36-acre plot that's in West Chiltington in West Sussex, and they now have over 327 or so hectares. So in acre terms, that's 2.5 times again. And they've got vineyard plots in Kent and in Hampshire as well as in Sussex. And they've got an amazing winemaking couple called Brad Greatrix and Sherry Spriggs.
Yes.
And they're Canadian. And Sherry actually, again, achieved a real first for England as Night Timber about 3 years ago, I think, in the International Wine Challenge. She won the trophy for International Sparkling Winemaker of the Year. And that was the first time a sparkling winemaker from outside of Champagne won that trophy. Wow. I hasten to add it was the first time a female won it as well. So they really have clocked up a lot of firsts. And Chapel Down, I know you're very fond of Chapel Down. They're brilliant. They have a really good range of wines from very, very premium down to very accessible wines at an affordable price that you can get in the supermarkets. But these plantings on the North Downs, they're producing some really exceptional single varietal Chardonnays, for example, and they've got plots of Bacchus there too.
It's Coty, and yeah.
Yeah, and they actually oak age the Bacchus, which for a sort of aromatic variety, people would wonder, but actually, do you know what? It's fabulous. And their Chardonnay, they're still Chardonnay, which is oak aged, and they also actually produce a 100% Chardonnay sparkling wine too, absolutely cracking. And then Ridgeview, you know, celebrated 25 years now in the since their first wine was released, going from strength to strength. And it's a family operation, that, which I love. So it was set up by the great Michael Roberts and his wife Christine, and Mike was chairman of EWP for English Wine Producers for many years, and a lot of people went to Mike for advice when they were coming into the industry, and he always gave them advice. Very sadly, he is no longer with us, but his daughter Tamara is the CEO, and his son Simon is the head winemaker, and an assortment of other family members are involved, and it's great to see them go from strength to strength. So yes, they're on the highest tables in the land, these lovely wines.
Yeah. Well, when, you know, we used to do various different wine dinners, winemakers from around the world coming to Hotel de Van, and when we went to the bar afterwards, which was a kind of a given that would happen, we always used to pour them a glass of Night Timber to show off, really, to say, because they'd all heard of it, but very few of them had tried it. They were in the UK for 3 nights, whistle-stop tour, probably 3 dinners, and a load of tastings, and we'd get them a glass of Night Timber before they went to bed, and they were always blown away. My memories of Chapel Down, really, from Hotel de Van, we used to often do food festivals, and we'd have a list of 12 different wines, and we did have a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc on there, but we used to play a game, try not to sell the New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, so we always try and offer something more interesting, and you know, well loved for good reason, but of course it's the automatic selection. People go for what they know, and what we would do with people would be always fascinated to see that we had an English wine. And these weren't necessarily, because this was it wasn't in Hotel de Van, it was out in Victoria Square. It was, you know, a food festival, so people weren't necessarily really into or knowledgeable about their wines. Certainly not about their English wines. And they would say, "English wine, I bet that's rubbish, isn't it?" So we'd say, "Well, I'll tell you what, have a little taste. If you like it, we'll top it up, and but it's free to try." And nobody ever didn't pay for the top up, because it was, and then they would go and find other people and bring them back and say, "You've got to try this. It's English," which was fantastic, and testament to a really good wine at a great price as well. You know.
Yeah. No, it is good, and it's actually getting people to taste it, and you know, the demand is there. You know, we talked a little bit earlier on about how the demand has really surged. The retail sales have gone up in the last few months. Yeah. People are wanting to support local. I think as a nation, I think we're so proud now of what we produce. You know, the boom in British food and drink, you know, as a whole sector is so supported now, isn't it? And I think it's our largest export sector as well. So British food and drink goes around the world. Yeah. And you know, we're really proud to have English wines as part of that. And you know, people are taking it really, really seriously. There's actually a book out which people can get hold of, I gather, because publication date is the 3rd of September. But the great Oz Clarke has recorded his sort of thoughts and travels. Sorry?
I thought you preferred Jancis Robinson.
Well, I said Jancis Clarke, didn't I? And Oz Robinson.
Oh yeah, true. Okay. I missed that. You got away with that one, yeah.
I got away with that.
Yeah. Sorry about that, by the
way. He's written a delightful book, actually, just charted, and he's been entranced with English wine for years and years. He's actually one of the co-judges of our Wine GB Awards. We're still hosting the competition this year, which is brilliant. We're really pleased, because you can imagine there are a few challenges there, but he and Susie Barry, Master of Wine and presenter, they're co-judges. But yeah, he's written a book about it, so people can find out more and more. And I know that people are going to want to delve into those pages and learn a bit more about it. You know, there's a real appetite for it, I think, which is great.
Yeah. Now, I seem to remember, so thinking about our climate, I seem to remember that Chapel Down suffered really badly one vintage, where hail wiped out a great deal of their vines, the fruit on the vine, and then set about actually having grapes growing in different counties. So they're now in Essex, aren't they? They're in Kent, I think Sussex. So where they've kind of, I guess, spread that liability. Is the British climate more vulnerable to hail and other climatic problems for the harvest than, say, France?
Well, I'd be sort of lying if I said, you know, it was all everything in the garden was rosy, because obviously we've got vagaries of the weather, and being a cooler climate, of course, we're going to have some issues. we had a bit of a problem earlier this year with frost, late frost as well. And of course, back in April, the weather was stunning. And what it meant was that it encouraged the vines to grow slightly earlier than you'd expect them to for that time of year. And then along came the frost in May. And I know some vineyards got very, very badly hit. And that is, it is one of the risks that you have in growing in our climate. Less of a problem with hail. Hail is more of a sort of continental issue. So you do hear of horrendous stories of hail in vineyards of Bordeaux and in Burgundy and places. But we also have issues with mildew. So if it gets too humid, you're obviously going to get some mildews as well. That's something that vineyards can take measures against to a certain degree by spraying the vines against the threat of mildews. I mean, yes, we're an outdoor climate that is sometimes, there are some vagaries, aren't there?
Unreliable.
But, if you think about it, this is really no different from any of the other classic wine regions in the world, actually.
Yeah.
But certainly in Europe, it's not perfect in all of those classic wine regions. The difference is, of course, that we're still quite a small industry. I mean, you mentioned the rate of plantings and actually how much we produced in 2018. Last year, I can tell you, we produced just under 10.5 million bottles, and I think that's sort of going to become more average. Before then, it was about 5 million bottles, but the rate of growing, rate of planting we've done is going to mean that we're going to be producing an awful lot of wine, and particularly sparkling wine, but it's still a very small region compared to, say, even Champagne or Bordeaux or the like. So if we do get a bad hit, then obviously that's going to make a dent. I think the good news, because we've been producing more and more sparkling wine, and obviously that takes a number of years to evolve into a market ready bottle, we've got good stocks now in our cellars. So I know a number of those vineyards who said they got badly hit this year. They said, but don't worry, we haven't run out of wine. We've got wine from 2018, of course, which was a good vintage. And you're absolutely right, Tony. Some of those bigger producers who have the ability to spread their vineyards across different parts of the country, either by leasing or by buying in the grapes or owning, of course, it does minimize the risk. But, it is what it is. You're going to have some good years. You're going to have some less good years.
So what for the future of English and British wine? When you look at those league tables, the top 20 wine producing countries in the world, we're a little way off there, aren't we, at the moment? Will we ever be able to compete in terms of production volume? Or will it always be, I guess, a bit boutique and always about the quality?
I think, there are some regions that are so vast that we couldn't possibly try and compete on the volume front. I think the important thing for us, I think that is an advantage for us, because it means that we can and should only focus on good quality wine. We don't need to produce vast quantities of cheaper table wine. Don't forget, this is an extraordinary market in the UK. We probably have the widest range of wines from around the world coming into this country, and so we've got pretty heavy competition. So we can focus on producing the stuff that we know we produce best, that goes well with the food that we produce. And actually one big area that we're going to be doing more of is exporting. So those wonderful sparkling wines of ours are already being exported, but we'll expect to do a little bit more. So I think the importance that when it comes to competition, it's making sure that we're competing well on the quality stakes rather than just going out and out for volume.
Well, Julia, I think that's exactly what we're doing, and you're a big part of that in terms of telling the story of English and British wine. So thank you for everything that you do with that. Thank you for helping me over the years and my education in English and British wine. It's been great fun to chat to you tonight. We've tipped over the hour. It's flown by.
Oh, golly, really?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me. We didn't quite make the dinner happen last year. I think this year could be a bit of a write-off, but let's try and get something in the diary for next year.
We'll make it a date,
to catch up with you in person again.
Oh, it'll be great. Thank you.
Yeah, I will continue to champion this wonderful nectar from our fair isles. And cheers.
Cheers to you too. Thank you very much, Tony. Cheerio.
Thanks for joining us. Cheers.